Hello. Oh, wow, that's loud. Hi, Jesse. Okay. Great. Nice to see familiar faces in here. So, have people been enjoying Roll-Up Day so far? How many people have been here the whole time? Great. All right. Well, this has been an exciting one. This is, I think, the third one that YQ and AltLayer have put together, right? Third Roll-Up Day? Yes. Okay. And they've all been really good. Well, you guys are hopefully in for a treat. I'm giving a talk that I really haven't given in this format. I presented like half the slides somewhere, but now I kind of put them together with something maybe even a little more interesting. So it's not going to be the typical just the whole time kind of shilling our project. Towards the end, I'll talk about how our project sits. But as you can tell from this is sort of a, looking back and looking forward, and trying to learn a little bit of lessons from history and like what's going to rhyme. So the focus here is I'm going to talk about a lot of different aspects of open tech and then try to bring them relevant at the end of like what's going to change, what's the best opportunities, how to use blockchain for that. So the three sections that I'm going to talk about are the what of open tech, and then very briefly after I've gone through a lot of that, just try to bring it together to like why open tech wins. Not an obvious thing, because if you look at any given point in time, it always looks like closed tech seems to be ahead. But then somehow the long-term trend is that closed systems go away and get replaced by open ones. So why is that? And then the last thing is on open technology. I used to just say, hello blockchain or hello crypto or whatever. But I actually really want to focus. Cello had a good session 2 days ago, if anybody caught it, which was about settlement day. And so I kind of recast a bunch of ideas just in terms of like doing proper trusted settlement of things as like a theme in crypto. So I'm using that here again. So the evolution of open, wow, my little line got screwed up, but okay, that's fine. So I put this here because, I happen to be, I guess, old enough that I just, like when I was kind of growing up, I actually saw the beginning parts of those things. And then I ended up working across pretty much after the first one or two, pretty much everything on this list. And the theme has just been really strong over time, that there's a lot of work proprietary early on, and then eventually you have to kind of abandon a whole bunch of things that have done, and then you go to open systems. People figure out how to, make it a lot more open. And like this one, Kubernetes, for instance, I don't know if, it's still around now, like Docker to Kubernetes, but that was like much more, still Docker was open, but it wasn't as open, right? It was still with .cloud. But yeah, so, TCP, internet very open. You can debate, should I put iPhone in open or not, but compared to cell phones before, how many people actually used a cell phone before an iPhone? Yeah, a couple of us here. Those sucked. Those were bad. I was like, you're using this thing and you're like, okay, this is like a grade school project. The UIs were such a joke. But, definitely open, right? You had App Store, a little bit too controlled, but you still had the ability for people to do all sorts of, put new software out there. It was just a rent-seeking market. Android's better. Linux, Kubernetes, and then post-blockchain, I like phrasing it this way because it's kind of fun, right? Fiat money to Bitcoin. And then Ethereum really added the CeFi to DeFi embedded in the platform. So a lot of kudos to Ethereum. One time I put this slide and I just focused on that. And let's just say a very prominent person in the Ethereum space kind of tapped me on the shoulder afterwards and said, we should actually say ETH does money too. We shouldn't just say Bitcoin does money. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. I shouldn't just give that up. Ethereum is money. And then identity, crypto keys, DIDs, walled garden data. It's not necessary that like NFTs and interplanetary linked data, provenance data pipelines, like those can have an aspect of being siloed too, not as much as walled gardens on Facebook or Google or what have you. But we do have to actually work on not just opening, but also doing it in an anti-silo way. So we have like unified data lakes. And then one other I'm going to say a couple slides on is decentralized physical infrastructure. And it's maybe a footnote for a lot of people, but I actually say it's really important because it's a systematic risk for us when we have governments and data centers where it's completely known where infrastructure is, really it's going to slow us down if we don't get away from that model. Okay, so let me skip this one. Okay, let me skip this too. How do I get back to the slides? Help. I screwed up and dropped out of slide presentation. Thank you. Okay, keep my finger in the right spot. So just in the interest of time, let me do the final build one. So is this familiar to a lot of people? Raise this if you fully have thought about this stack. Okay, since more than half the room hasn't, I'll just say, like, if you're a person who's like full stack engineering and you're thinking about your whole system, you're going to start for the components of CPUs, disks, internet or networking, and then you're going to build these layers, and each one of them is kind of like an API layer of the stack. And so here's just something saying that, like, cloud didn't happen instantly. We started off for a long time in technology with everything on premise. You had to buy all the equipment, you had to wire it, system administrators, network administrators. Then we went to this much more open model of infrastructure, that's the hardware as a service, platform as a service, which is middleware, and then software as a service, which is what we interact with on our phones. And that's what's being replaced by DPIN now. And you look at it and you're like, well, it's open, that's great, but I just want to highlight a couple problems on it. One is that almost the whole market is just across a couple of players, so you get really unfair pricing as a result of that. And then the second, more critical, who here is a software developer? Yeah? Okay. All right. We have some non-software developers. God, I wish I had a chance to go around and ask. So I probably, that would be interesting. But anyway, so before clouds, we had this open source, then you'd monetize it, and customers would use it. This is, in terms of where we are now, something that really bugs me is that in the Web 2 public cloud, you create your open source, you hope you're going to make money from it somehow, but in reality, you're competing against the very cloud platform vendors, AWS and others, who take your open source code, don't add much to it, but then they just monetize it out from under you, so that's awful. So just inspiring in my mind is that I want to get more money back to software developers. So dApps and the crypto monetized cloud, I think, offers that option where the open source and the hardware are both organized through crypto mechanisms and dApps, so we can keep all the money in the system. So that's sort of an important point for me, because it means that we can go from proprietary data clouds to Web3 data clouds. And this to me is the most important feature. There's a lot of different ways to build the stack, but the important one is the monetary flows stay inside of it. They're not controlled by anyone else. And this is just showing, this is pretty much everything's on this list. Vast majority of it is open source projects that Google or others didn't do, but they put products around. And then my last one here is, a lot of times people actually think that maybe we don't have two centralized clouds because they look at the architecture. The tech architecture has a lot of redundancy. It's very decentralized. But on the other three metrics of who gets to bill, who gets to set pricing, have access, and then who gets to actually get the revenue back, it's all the cloud providers. So this is really important for us in crypto, that all the infrastructure runs and it's all decentralized, not just the top one. Okay, so the why of open tech. All right, this is one slide, but I do think it's important I just say something about it. How am I doing on time? Oh, 8 minutes. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see that little laptop there. So, okay, so this is something I said in the beginning. Short-term closed systems have small group that controls them. They're getting all the benefit from it. So you think about it, the revenue flywheel goes back to one player, and it spins up really fast, and they get control. And Web 2 investors have learned this model since the early 2000s when they figured out how to make money from internet and open source. And they've really leaned into this, that they'll fund companies with billions of dollars the whole time for free, network effect, user acquisition, everything. And then at a certain point, oops, they flip the switch. And when that happens, the pricing becomes very detached from realistic fair pricing. And then second, equally important one, maybe the most disastrous one, is open innovation just stops. Like Sam Altman did a thing one time for Y Combinator, where he was pointing out how much money Google invested in its like Google X and all these different projects, and what return came from it, which is like pretty close to big fat zero, and versus like how many things spun out of Y Combinator for a fraction of that money and then provided massive benefits. So, long-term open innovation, why does it work? Because I am fundamentally very human positive. More people being involved every step of the way means you don't have railroaded ideas, values, thoughts, everything. You're not stuck with like, why is like a social network from the US being used across, 200 different countries that all have completely different cultures, religions, people's way of living. And the feature velocity on this long-term innovation around crypto, my belief is it just accelerates. After Justin's talk, maybe some people feel like 5 years is not super fast, but I think the EF can do better than 5 years for Beam Chain. We'll see. I was kind of comping it. I thought maybe 3 years is a reasonable target, but they do need to try to go faster, in my opinion. And so, if you've heard the phrase tipping point, I kind of say that like sometimes it's gentle and you'll have like something slowly moving across from closed to open. But a lot of times it's very much a tipping point. I mean, like the iPhone, you didn't have Sony and Ericsson become players in that. They just got replaced because the new model was better. And a lot of times it feels very slow, like we're not making a lot of progress. But somewhere in the future when we pass it, we go from like 1% to 99% really fast of ownership of a market. So, just stay optimistic. Okay, and then open tech meets crypto. Oh, okay, I have 6 minutes. That's great. That's enough time for this. So, so these are kind of new slides. 3 settlement classes in crypto. Okay, and I'm trying out this framework, so it's probably, maybe I'll tighten it up over time. But the first 2 are inspired by, a while back, I think it was Bill Hughes first who posted it, money crypto and tech crypto. And I like that, but then I was like, well, what does that mean exactly? It's just sort of like, that's like a thing that you do with it, but what's more core than that? And I've always had this idea that like settlement and transaction de-risking, would somebody mind closing the door over there? It's just a decent amount of noise. That being able to effectively settle transactions and having somebody else absorb the risk of those transactions, that's what's needed in business. Like it's just very hard to do something with someone if you're like, well, I might make a few % on this, or I might lose all my money. So somebody absorbing that transaction risk and then providing you an effective settlement that has that included is like absolutely key. So that's where money crypto got that first, with the very limited use case of Bitcoin, and then with Ethereum bringing it into like settlement of anything. Tech settlement, maybe that's a little bit more abstract, but I have a couple slides to tell you exactly what I mean by that. And then society settlement is the most abstract, and so I don't actually know if I can convey it super well, but I'll try. And then I'd love people afterwards to come up and talk with me so I can kind of make those slides better. So the tech settlement, a lot going on this slide. But I just want us all to like ignore the bottom part for a sec. I'm sorry I didn't do a proper build on this because it's a JPEG. But look at the top. This is what we've had. The bottom is like eigenlayers, but forget about it being eigenlayer. Just think about being restaking. So the top one, Ethereum token, consensus, the beacon chain, and in the future, the beam chain. And then execution is the EVM. And then, we as software developers, a lot of us are writing dApps. But they have to run as Solidity in an EVM with a 12-second block time, with 14 transactions per second, with many minutes for finality. And that's the speed of like what you can build in terms of like your financial settlement or even tech settlement platforms that go through that execution layer. So what's missing is you're not able to actually go back and control the software nodes running consensus, because the beacon chain is just set up to do one thing, which is Ethereum consensus. So EigenLayer, and the restaking paradigm shift is that you can take the economic value in ETH tokens and in anything that settles on Ethereum. So of course, Eigen is a token, but anybody in this room's ERC20 is a token that settles on Ethereum. All of that is in the same L1 security settlement domain, right? And so you take those and you put them into a restaking protocol. Once you've done this, now there's a security marketplace and AVS, actively validated service. This just means a generalized version of consensus. So you have a decentralized pool of validators, you write software, and you don't have to decentralize. Like all of that is already in the protocol. The security services, the API for it, operators are well known. They're already running tens of AVSs at this point. They add another one. It's sort of like super amped up generalization of Alchemy and other things. And all those guys are getting in this market because it works so well. Okay, so sorry, I got to speed up a little at this point. Oh, geez. Okay, so left to right. Sorry, again, my build is screwed up there. But Bitcoin, all a monolith, one kind of one rectangle for each of them. Ethereum, Vitalik's and Gavin Wood's key idea was that the application in the EVM, pardon my screw up on the graphics, that can be now generalized in Solidity code and EVM. Then the rollup era basically moved that generalization down, that the execution layer in rollups can be other things. You can actually have different VMs that are being settled onto the consensus. So you have ZK Sync and all of these ZK and other systems. We even have like Solana VMs on rollups at this point, or Cosmos VMs. So, and then the restaking kind of eigenlayer model was that what you need to do consensus is you need to generalize the peer-to-peer networks that run decentralized software. And if you can't do it with this kind of restaking model on Ethereum, your only other choice is to start a new L1, which from an innovation standpoint is a huge restarting of the whole system. And so it just builds up and takes a lot more time. So this is an open innovation, faster unlock to be able to do those. I'm just going to jump through some kind of hero slides. But basically, things are going great at Eigen later. Yep. Okay, so just so I can cover it, the last thing to talk about is this idea of society settlement. Did that seem odd to people? This society settlement? It's probably very vague. Okay, so I was going to say social settlement, but then I thought everyone's going to think it's social networking. So let me use society. So with L1s, you can slash certain types of human observable tasks. You can have majority voting, you can make subcommittees, and then if everything goes wrong, you can just fork the L1. And in theory, like kind of slash the people like happened to, I think, was it Justin's son? Whatever, Sushi Swap, where they slashed his tokens. The problem is that EigenLayer, like anybody else built on Ethereum, is not an L1, it's an L2, and Ethereum's really clear they're not gonna fork anymore, no matter what's happening. For DApp type problems, just because they can't revert the chain. It's like just a really bad thing to do for immutability. But so EigenLayer, come up and talk to me if you want to understand it more, but big invention is slashing by token forking. So we have an off-chain protocol that allows the value of tokens that are in DeFi to basically get slashed and forked. And that allows us to now have crypto economic forking projected back to Ethereum without layer 1 forking. So that's the human observable unlock. So, okay. And then I'll give a pointer to the slides, but basically, things that are on chain, you can do with like regular fraud proofs, ZK proofs. But then all of these things here, I could go through, but it's a longer discussion. There are parts here that you would never be able to prove with a mathematical ZK proof. But you can prove them if you have slashing off-chain, that you allow people to say, hey, we all saw that. We saw that person cheated. And so, we can actually slash them. And the bottom one, promises, because these four are like good examples, but promises, credible promises, which are general credible commitments, super valuable because now you have a platform for basically being able to commit to anything off-chain. Like you could commit that, my take rate on Uber is 1%. On my Uber competitor, if you ever change it, you'll get slashed. People will actually take your token value away and say, hey, you lied to us. You can make a Facebook that says, we're never gonna give away more privacy without asking for the users to accept it en masse, not through these stupid privacy EULAs that we have to like either accept or get the hell out. So yeah, so here, like this is the final one is, enabling this means that society settlement can now look at the two most valuable parts for positive sum games, innovation, coordination, and accelerate both of them. And so innovation gives you a free market, coordination, like in real world, is like constitutions. And technology and the free market is really accelerating with AI. To date, the societal coordination mechanisms, gold, money, companies, constitutions, they don't really have a tech component. But the amazing part now is that tech platforms, they're kind of opt-in autocracies. They can have the efficiency of being like running well, they have defined rules, everything, but they're opt-in, meaning that people can actually say, I want to actually get out of this, fork it, and make my new version of this autocracy, which is like a big threat. It means that in a sense, you don't have to use it as much. Okay. Global internet native, self-enforcing coordination for humanity, basically being able to do off-chain promises and then slash them on-chain. So thank you very much.